Hello everyone and welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul and today's video is all about the Seagate 600 Pro Series SSD. I do have some benchmarks on this drive as well as a quick overview. It is still, well, no, it's not sealed. So here's what amounts to your unboxing. Basically this is an OEM drive, so it's just going to ship in a bit of electromagnetically shielded packaging right there. And then you have the drive itself. Now, if you've been watching our channel, you might have seen some of our SSD videos and you might be thinking, I've actually already seen this drive. Well, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but it has a partner or an alternative. So basically you have the Seagate 600 series, which is the black drive I have right here, and you have the 600 Pro series, which is this one. Apart from the 600 series looking a little bit prettier since this is designed more so for consumer use, the 600 Pro has a few slight differences, but there are a lot of similarities between the drive themselves. So for one, the 600 and the 600 Pro are both based on Link A Media's LM87800 controller. It does have customized Seagate firmware in both of these. And that controller is going to be paired with a couple DDR2 800 devices, so that's going to give you about 1 megabyte of RAM per gigabyte of NAND storage in each drive. And the RAM is used for caching, the NAND storage is used for permanent storage, and that's kind of how SSDs have been working these days. All the capacities that are available for either of these drives are going to ship with 8 NAND packages, which is kind of nice because if you look at a SSD controller, there's going to be a bunch of channels that are available, and if you don't have enough NAND packages to match up with the controller, then it's not going to get quite the same amount of performance. But Seagate has gone with going with all 8 NAND packages, and then each capacity that's available might have a different amount of dies in each package, and that basically gives you more or less capacity depending on the drive that you're going with. Speaking of capacity, this drive is available in 480 gig, 240 gig, and 120 gigabyte capacities. I happen to have the 240 gig right here, so that's what the benchmark numbers will show in a few moments are going to be referencing. It also has a few other versions as far as capacity, so you can get it in 100, 200, and 400 gigabyte versions, and those versions actually have spare area set aside on the drive by default straight from Seagate. If you're not familiar with spare area, basically it's space that exists on the drive but you don't have direct access to it, and by setting aside spare area, which is also known as over-provisioning, they're going to allow the drive to maintain its performance over the lifespan of the drive. And this is actually something that I recommend with all SSDs, is setting aside between 15 and 20% of your storage space just as unused storage area, and that will allow the drive to maintain its lifespan as well as maintain peak performance as you use the drive over the weeks and years and that you have it. Apart from that, the NAND in this drive is 19 nanometer Toshiba 2 bits per cell MLC NAND. This is a 7mm 2.5 inch form factor drive, so 7mm Z height, top to bottom right there, so that means it should fit in many of the laptops and even some Ultrabooks that are available. Just make sure you have a 2.5 inch form factor drive space available, and then apart from that 2.5 inch form factor, you still have the same mounting points available right there, so you can mount it from the side or you can mount it from the bottom. Pretty standard when it comes to 2.5 inch drives. This drive's housing is actually fairly difficult to get into, which is why I'm not showing you guys the internals of the drive here, but you can do it. I just didn't really want to because the Seagate drives that I've come across so far, I've only had one that I actually took apart, and that was with some assistance from our Seagate rep who promised me that he would replace it if we ended up breaking it, so that wasn't much of a problem. For the interface, again, with SSDs, pretty much all of them these days, or at least the high-end ones, are going with Serial ATA Revision 3. That gives you 6 gigabits per second of maximum data throughput, so you can see the standard Serial ATA data and power connection points right there on that end, and those are full size, so bear that in mind again if you are planning on installing this into a smaller device such as a laptop or a netbook. Let's see, what am I forgetting? Oh, 5-year manufacturer warranty for this drive. So let's get into some of the differences between this drive and the Seagate standard Pro drive that we can see right here. You do get a longer warranty for the 600 Pro series drive, and that's again just because it's meant to be more for enterprise usage. So they actually will bin the NAND, or they test the NAND memory in there to make sure that they're going to get NAND in here that's going to have a bit longer of a lifespan. So this drive's rated for actually more than 40 gigabytes of writes per day throughout the warranty period, which is quite a lot, and particularly if you're going to be using this in a desktop or consumer usage scenario, you're really never going to hit that unless you're doing something crazy that I've never heard about with your computer. The other really cool thing that this has, and then again this is more geared towards enterprise usage is actually capacitors that have been integrated onto the PCB itself, integrated onto the circuit board, which means that if there's a power failure while you are using the drive, the capacitors will have a bit of stored energy that will allow the controller to flush out the DDR memory that has temporary stored data, write that onto the NAND packages to make sure that that data is saved, which again is sort of a fail-safe measure that they've integrated specifically for when you're using this in enterprise situations where your data is very, very important and you want to make sure that you don't lose anything. Next up, let's take a look at some benchmarks. So these are just some screen caps from my benchmark testing that I ran on this, running Windows 8 64-bit this time around, and I've got a new test bed that I've just recently set up. So processors, an Intel Core i7-4770K. Big thanks to Intel for providing us with that. Then the motherboard is an Asus Maximus 6 Formula, so again a huge thanks to Asus for providing us with that. The drive is connected directly to the controller, the Z87 Serial ATA Revision 3 controller, so it's a native, which is going to give you the best performance on a platform like this. And of course we're running at SATA Revision 3 speeds, so your SATA transfer rate 6 gigabits per second right there. Our first test over on the left side is SSD, which is a popular and free SSD benchmark. Simply runs through a bunch of tests. I just did the basic tests here, and this is actually the same test on both sides. Just on the left we can see megabytes per second. On the right we can see input-output operations per second. Now when it comes to SSD testing, there's kind of 4 cornerstones of performance. There's read and write, of course, and then typically you have sequential read and write, and then you also have 4K read and write, which are much smaller files, so you don't see quite as large of numbers as you do with sequential reads and writes. But 4K is a great example of sort of day-to-day computing tasks, and you'll see many, many more 4K read and writes with typical computing stuff than you would with sequential read and writes. So sequential is kind of is more showing you maximum performance if you're doing something like transferring large files or something along those lines. But for reads and writes for sequential, we had 491 megabytes per second and 424 megabytes per second. And then down here on the 4K, we hit about 330 and 304 megabytes per second for reads and writes respectively. The 4K test will also give you a lot of input-output operations per second, which is also a very popular measurement for SSD performance. So about 84,000 on the reads and about just shy of 78,000 on the writes. Overall score was 1,069, and generally speaking, from my perspective at least, if a SSD can surpass 1,000 points with the SSD test, it means it's a very high-performing SSD and definitely right up there with everything that's currently available, at least when it comes to SATA Revision 3 connectivity. Next up we have Atto. This is also a very popular free disk benchmarking utility. It's been used by drive manufacturers for many, many years, and often if you see rated specifications on an SSD's retail box, those will be drawn from Atto. But I did 2 types of tests here. The one on the left is at a Q depth of 4. The one on the right is a Q depth of 10. So the Q depth 10 is what you'll often see shown for maximum drive performance. But we can actually see pretty similar performance on either side of the chart right there. Bear in mind it's listing kilobytes, which is why it's in the 549,000 range, but we can reduce that to megabytes by simply moving the decimal point over. So on the Q depth 4, we peaked at about 551 megabytes per second right down there, and on the writes we actually got up to about 470 megabytes per second, actually 471.9 on the last test right there. On the Q depth 10, again very similar results, pretty much the same actually, still about 471 was our peak on the right, and again about 550, actually 552 on the reads. So very, very nice performance across the board for both the reads and the writes. Our next test is from Blackmagic, which actually makes devices that are used in video production, but video production is often very, very keen on having really fast read and write speeds for your storage. So they've set up this test to indicate whether a drive is going to perform sufficiently for use specifically with video. So all the green check marks down there are for different types of video formats and different resolutions, as well as different color depths. And as you go across here, the color depth increases, which is why down here in the lower right corner, this is kind of the most heavy use type of stuff if you're working at 2.5K resolution or 2K resolution, and you're doing 12-bit RGB. So we can see lots and lots of green check marks here, and the solution, if you really were trying to work with something like that, would be simply take 2 of these drives, pair them together in RAID, and then you could get the the performance you'd need. But that said, still great performance across the board, and you could use this drive right out of the box for most at-home types of video editing tasks. And then for our actual speeds up here, 435 megabytes per second on writes and 452 megabytes per second on the reads. One more test, and this is Crystal Disk Mark. Results are down here at the bottom. So here are sort of your big results, and then we also have the text results that shows us input-output operations per second. Again, you're going to see really similar results here to the AS SSD tests that we ran. So about 514 megabytes per second for reads sequential, 463 megabytes per second for writes. Our 4K tests were 26.94 and 122.9 for the writes. Very nice performance right there. And 4K QDEP32, of course, as well, which again gives us our highest input-output operations per second numbers, where it was able to hit 90,000 IOPS for the read, which is kind of that golden number that a lot of the high-end SATA Rev 3 drives try to hit, and for random writes, just shy of 85,000 IOPS. And that is going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Once again, this has been the Seagate 600 Pro Series SSD. We've been testing the 240 gigabyte model. Fantastic SSD for home use, or if you're looking for enterprise use, there's a lot of extra features that they've added on specifically for you guys who might be looking for some storage solutions for your data centers. I'm Paul with Newegg TV, and if you enjoyed this video or found it useful or entertaining, go ahead and leave me some feedback, a comment in the comment section, or maybe click the like button if you enjoyed what you saw today. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.